Hi everybody. So we want to go ahead and start really delving into Adobe Illustrator now. Adobe Illustrator is a vector graphics application, and really the great thing about vector graphics is they're perfectly scalable. So you can create an Adobe Illustrator image and use it for a business card, and then take that same image and use it for a billboard without getting artifacts from changing the size of the image. So what we're going to do now is I've created some chunks of information that are going to show you about the different tools and possibilities with Adobe Illustrator, the functionalities of the software, things you can do, and how you make that stuff happen. I'll start off with how to save files, then we'll get into a lot of the other tools that are available to you in Adobe Illustrator. And what I recommend you do is have Adobe Illustrator, and you should have hopefully a 2-monitor display. Have Adobe Illustrator up on one of those displays and the video on the other. If you don't, I guess you can just kind of alt-tab between the video and Adobe Illustrator and pause things. But nonetheless, doodle a little bit using the different functions of Adobe Illustrator that I'm going to demonstrate here, and just see what you can do with them and sort of get a feel for how the software works, okay? And once you finish kind of going through that and making that doodle, save that doodle. And early on, I'll show you how to save or export files. Just save what you've doodled as an Adobe Illustrator file, and have that. And then I'll be back after going through this content to talk a little more about what you can do and what I would like for you to do for me using Adobe Illustrator, using the information that we're going to cover here. Okay, so I'll be back later, and hope you enjoy this content.
Quickly cover how to create and save or export files with Adobe Illustrator. The first thing you're going to need to encounter, of course, is how to open Illustrator and then create a new project. So let's just go over that. Of course, you just click on the Illustrator or double click on the Illustrator icon, or find the application on your computer and double click on it. And then give Illustrator just a minute to open up. Illustrator might take a little longer than some applications on your computer. It's pretty robust, so sometimes I notice that Illustrator takes a minute to boot up. You'll get this load screen here. This is where you can see which version you've got. Right now I'm running Illustrator CC. It looks like this is 2017 was the most recent update to Illustrator on this computer. And once Illustrator is up and running, a lot of times it'll give you a splash screen with the options to create a file. If it doesn't give you the splash screen, you can just go File, New. And I'm still waiting for it to catch up. Okay, good. So then you're going to get these options. You can do dimensions, and these are artboard dimensions, and you'll see what an artboard is when I open it up, but it's, you know, the size and type of image you want to make. So these are going to be mobile sizes and images. These will be web sizes and images. So you're looking at screen dimensions here, like for example 1920 by 1080. So that's going to be good if you're doing 1080p or 1080 dimensions, like if you were doing a video that was going to have 1080. In fact, this would be a good size for like when I create YouTube videos for text screens, etc. There's going to be print sizes, like a traditional letter sized, etc. Film and video, so again you're going to have that 1920 by 1080. Here's 720 and up, and then art and illustration, so these are going to be different sizes for that. I'm just going to go web and go 1920 by 1080. So I'm going to click on that, and you'll see over here it's going to give me the width and height dimensions. If you want to see those sizes in inches or centimeters, you can choose that, but I'm going to stick with pixels here. You could name it if you want to, so I could just say example. And you have an option for margins here if you want to do that, and number of artboards. So you could do just one, and that's just going to give you one artboard to work on. If you go two, you'll see that that'll give me two. So I'm going to create two just so you can see what happens when I do that. And you're just going to click create and then give it just a minute. Now I have two artboards to work on. Okay, you can use the slider here to move back and forth to center the artboard you want to use, and then Command or Control plus to zoom in. Okay, so that's how you create a project. Now let me just put something on here. Okay, a couple rectangles. And some text. Make it real big so you can actually see it. Okay, so now we've actually, got something that we could save if we want to save an image. So here's how you save. You'll just go File, Save, and then it's going to ask you a title. I already put in a name, and I called it Example, and I can choose to save it to my desktop. And when I do so, it'll save this AI file, which is Adobe Illustrator file, to the desktop. Now, an AI file is not going to be accessible to just anyone that doesn't have Adobe Illustrator on their computer. So I'll click Save, click OK. And now that gives me a file. If I close and I want to open back up and work on this same file again on my computer with Adobe Illustrator, that's going to allow me to do so. And a lot of times, if you are sending an image off to a company to be used to create some sort of an artifact, like posters or pins, billboards, business cards, they might want an Adobe Illustrator file because they'll have Illustrator, and this gives them a vector image which they can then scale at will. So a lot of times businesses will want the actual AI file, but if you're making a website or if you're just sending an image that you've created to a friend, you're going to want to create either most likely a PNG, a JPEG, maybe a PDF image. And so to do that, you're going to export, especially PNG and JPEG. I think you can actually save as a PDF, which is a lot of times documents you receive are PDFs. But if you want a JPEG or a PNG, you'll go File, Export, and Export As. And that's going to allow you to choose from all of these different file formats. Okay, PNG will allow you to have a transparent background. JPEG will not, and those are the two most common file types that you would save to. Okay, and then if you hit export, it's just going to save that PNG to the desktop. So if I go export, it's going to ask me a couple of questions like, do you want the transparent background, etc. And then you click OK and it'll save. I'm just going to hit cancel because I don't need that. Okay, but for our purposes, if you're just turning in an Illustrator file, you're just going to go File and Save. Now that I've already saved it once, I could do Save As. And see, right here, it's giving me an Adobe Illustrator file. Remember, we'll have naming conventions in here. So if it's so by the class, it'll depend on how you want to save it. So let's say for a class you have a naming convention that's last name, then maybe an abbreviation for the class, and then the assignment name. You do it like that, and that's how you would fill in a naming convention for an assignment. Okay, so that's how you save and or export a file. So we have an Adobe Illustrator file open. Let's take a look at the interface. First, we've got the overall application frame. You can see that it's just the outline of the overall Adobe Illustrator application. And you can change the size of that frame just by dragging here as I am. This bar across the top, the application bar, if you're going to be moving around the application, let's say you need to see specific other applications that might be open on your desktop without switching to another desktop, you can just grab that application bar at the top and move around here. Over here you've got your tools panel, which contains the tools for creating and editing images. And then you've got your control panel up here. Right now I have nothing selected on my artboard, so that no properties for a specific object are coming up here, but that's what will appear up here. And then you've got your properties panels over here, which will reflect properties in a variety of different areas depending on what kind of a project you're working on. This tab right here is going to be the tab that reflects the various projects that are open. You can have multiple tabs open if you're working on multiple different Illustrator files at once. And those are just the basics of the Essentials workspace in Adobe Illustrator. Probably the most fundamental tool in Illustrator is the selection tool, or the black arrow. So you can of course select that just by clicking in your tool panel, or you can see in parentheses when I hover over it, there's a V. That tells you about your direct selection from the keyboard. Just hitting the keystroke of V on your keyboard will also select the direct selection tool. So if I'm not on it, you can see, let's select the line tool. If I'm using the line tool and I want to switch to the selection tool or the black arrow, I can just click on it, of course, in the tool panel, or push down the V button on my keyboard, and that switches me to the selection tool. Now, to use the selection tool, I need something to select, so I'm going to move over to my second artboard where I've put in two objects, a circle and a square. So I'll just center that on the screen, and then there are two ways to select. I can just click on the object, and now I've selected it, or I can drag across two objects if I want to select multiple objects. So I select both of them that way. So here I select just the square, here I select both. Also, you can click on an object and then hold down the Shift key and select on another object, and that allows you to select that way. So that's the very basics of the selection tool. Remember, you can click, drag across, or click, hold down Shift, and click. Okay, so let's learn about the line segment tool. If you look over here at your tools panel, there's going to be a variety of different icons. We're going to use this one right here, the line segment tool. Now, you see this little triangle that shows up in the bottom right-hand corner of the icon. That means there's other tools underneath of the one that's being displayed. So if I just click and hold on that tool, you'll see 4 tools in addition to the line segment tool show up. If I want to pull this whole panel out so I can see all of the tools at once, I'll just go over to this triangle that's going to be on the side of the pull-out panel here and click on that, and now it gives me this pull-out panel with all 5 of the tools. I don't really need that right now. I'm just going to use this line segment tool for the moment. I just closed this one out. Okay, so we're going to use this line segment tool. Remember, when you're using Illustrator, you're using a vector art program, And so it's built upon mathematical models for lines in a two-dimensional space. So what we're creating when we create lines are called paths. And a path is made up of one or more straight or curved segments. So right now we're just going to make straight segments. And to do that, we're just going to select the line segment tool. And I'm just going to click and drag in the direction that I want the line to go. And when I let go, I've got a line segment. Now, the stroke of the line segment is the thickness of the particular line segment, and I've got a menu up here where I can just select and see a variety of numbers, or I can just manually select from these arrows. So if I want to go do a 10-point stroke, I just click here, and now you can see the line segment's that thick. So there you have it. I've created a line. Now if I just want to create another line, I just click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. Okay? So that's the most basic use of the line segment tool, just to create lines. The other way that you can use that tool, instead of just clicking and dragging, is you can just click at the point where you want the line to start from, and this menu box will pop up and you'll type in a value. So to give you a better view of how the value you type in affects the angle of the line, let's just take a look here on the other artboard I've selected. So I'm going to cancel this, and I'm just going to move over to the second artboard in my file. And I want you to just imagine that this black dot is where I am clicking to start my line segment from. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that black dot. Actually, let me lock these panels before I do that. And I'm just going to click right here. And that same menu is going to come up. So the length of the line in pixels right now, the ones that are drawn already here are 100 pixels. So I'm going to go twice as long as those, and I'll go 200 pixels. That's just going to be the length of the line. So now we're talking about the angle of the line in this second box here. So if I type in 90 degrees, you can see how this now reflects the direction the line's going to go. And that matches up to the 90 degrees line that I've already drawn on this example. If I go to 180, you can see that's what I'm going to get, which matches up to the blue 180. And you can obviously imagine if I type in 270, then I'm going to get a line that corresponds to the green 270 line here. So what do you think I'll get if I type in 45? What will that line look like? Click OK, and there you have it. Okay, so that's a 45-degree line. So that's the other way that you control the line segment tool. So now you have the ability to draw lines by dragging across the screen with the line segment tool, or you can draw them by controlling the menu. Another thing you can do is when you're drawing lines, let me get rid of these ones that I've already drawn. And now let's select our line tool again, and I'm dragging across. Okay, you can see that little yellow guide, hopefully, that gives you an idea of where the line would be if I dropped from dragging across here. But now let me hold down the Shift key. If I'm holding down the Shift key simultaneously to dragging across the screen, it's going to constrain the radius of my line by 45-degree chunks. So you see as I drag across, the line snaps to a variety of angles divisible by 45 degrees. So that makes it a lot easier to draw parallel and perpendicular and just control the radius of your line. So there's one, here's one at 45, 90, 145. Okay, so that's another handy tool when you're using the line segment tool. So you have a pretty good understanding now of how to control the direction of your lines as you create them and the distance or length of lines as you create simple line segments. To use the pen tool, select the fountain pen icon or hit the letter P on your keyboard. Click on the artboard to create line segments. Click and drag to create curved line segments. You'll create these Bezier handles when you create curved line segments, and you can manipulate them using the white arrow. Click on them and drag them around like so, and change the properties of a curved line. Click delete to go backwards, deleting anchor points. Click consecutively, then back to the original anchor point to create a solid shape that you can then give fill value to by clicking on the fill box here, and if you double click, it'll give you a color picker tool. You could click on swatches, pick a color, and select OK. Let's talk about stroke properties in Illustrator. So lines in Illustrator have a variety of properties known as stroke values. So let's go ahead and use the line segment tool, and let's draw a couple of paths. So I'm just going to go here, and I'll draw another one here. So now I've got two lines, and we're going to make some adjustments to these line segments using stroke properties. So right now, I don't have stroke properties panel up in my panel options, but I still have some stroke properties available. So this is your control panel area, and it responds or reflects the values of anything selected if you have something selected. So I'll select this line, and if you go up here, you can see this is the size of the stroke, and right now the weight of it is 10 points. So I can just use these arrows to adjust that value if I want to make it thicker or thinner. Or I can click on this arrow and I can select a direct number for that stroke. Okay, now I've also got a couple of other values, the variable width profile and the brush definition. We're not going to worry about the brush definition yet, but the variable width profile, if you click on this, it gives you a variety of options. And so let's see, let's look at this one. This one starts thick and goes to thin. Okay, and if I reverse that, with this one, it starts thin, goes to thick, and then goes back down thin again. So you can see that's how you can use just this simple drop-down variable width profile. But what if you want even more options? So let's open up our window for stroke properties. And so you just click on this drop-down menu of window and select stroke, and this window is going to pop up. Okay, so first of all, you've got that weight still. So let's select this other one. You've still got that weight, so I can go up, make it a pretty thick line. You have lots of options here, so I can go 100 point if I want to. Right? Now, we can control the cap. See here at the end of the line, I've got a straight line. I can go to a rounded line. And I can also go to a line that projects the cap out a little bit. See the difference? Okay, so I'm going to stick with my original. And then these would be corners and shapes. We're not going to affect that right now. I can put arrowheads on my lines. It's such a thick line that the arrowhead takes up basically the whole thing. So let's shrink this down to, let's go 10 points, and see now you've got your arrowhead like that. You have a variety of different arrows you can select from. I can swap which end the arrow's on using this. Okay, I can also control the profile here, just as I did from right here, but let's go like that. Now, one thing you can do here is, let's go again. All right, so now we're going from thick to thin, right? Let's get rid of the arrowhead for just a second, make it easier for you to see. So I'm going from thick to thin. I'll even make it a little thicker so you can see it easier. If I select right here, this will flip that. So look, bam. That's another degree of control that you have. You may want to have a dashed line, so I can select here, and now I've got a dashed line. And I can control the thickness of the dashes versus the gaps. They don't all have to be uniform. Like I could go 12, 10, 8, 6, 4. See, I'm creating a variety now in the staggering of my dashed line. Just get rid of that by unclicking. So that's the stroke control properties, or the stroke properties panel. And there's even more stuff in here that we haven't gone over, but that covers a lot of the options that you have in this. The basic shape tool can be located from this icon or by pressing the letter M on your keyboard. So there are several basic shape tools. So once again, you have several tools embedded under this same icon slot in your tool panel. So if I click and hold down on this icon that looks like a rectangle, you'll see that there's the rectangle tool, the rounded rectangle tool, the ellipse tool, polygon, star tool, and flare tool. We'll take a look at each of these, but not the flare tool right now. It's a little more complex, and it's more of an effect than a basic shape. So let's just start with the rectangle tool. And the easiest thing to do to create a rectangle is to just drag across the screen. And you'll see I've got this blue guide box that's showing what the rectangle will look like when I'm done. And there you go. Now this one is got a black outline, or a black stroke. So the edge of the shape, when we draw shapes, is called the stroke, and the color value for the stroke can be found right here. You can see there are the two boxes. If you hover over them, they say whether they are the stroke or the fill value. We'll talk about fill in just a moment. But the stroke value, if you hover over, now at the moment this is the top one, but I can change that by hitting X. But the stroke right now is black, and that's the color value. The size of the stroke is right here. You can click up to make that thicker. Now I've got a 10-point stroke on this rectangle. The fill color, I can double click on the other square here. And here's a color selection. I can use a slide up and down here to get different parts of the spectrum. And then I can select from this panel, or I can select color swatches here. And the default color picker swatches are available. And so I'm just going to make it red for the fill. There you go. So a black 10-point stroke with a red fill. Now, using still this same tool, the rectangle tool, if I hold down Shift when I drag, it will constrain what I create to a square. See, so I can drag anywhere on the screen. It will only let me draw squares. There you go. If I want to invert the color property, so I've got red fill and black stroke, I can just click these arrows right here and swap that out. Okay. Now let's take a look at another one of our basic shape tools, the rounded rectangle tool. You can drag out a rectangle just the same way, but it's got rounded corners. And if I use my up and down arrows, I can adjust, rather my left and right arrows, I can adjust the amount of rounding. So the left arrow gives me a rectangle, to the right gives me this heavily rounded capsule shape. Moving on, let's open up the ellipse tool. And you can just drag to create various ellipses. If you hold down on the Shift key, it will constrain you to a circle. So there's a circle, there's an ellipse, another one. So that's the ellipse tool. Polygon tool. You can just drag this out. Then my up and down arrow can add another edge to the polygon. You can go all the way down to a triangle and click all the way up, pentagon and further. Okay. Next, I've got the star tool. It works like the polygon tool. However, when you use the up arrow, it adds a point to the star. Down arrow, it subtracts all the way down to a triangle. And that's the basics of the star tool. As always, there's much more to every element of these Adobe applications, but those are the basics of how to use the basic
Brush
shape.
tool lets you make more stylized lines with more intuitive curves. You draw it either with your mouse by hand, or a lot of times the brush tool would be used with a stylus, such as with the Wacom tablet. To select the brush tool, just go up here. It looks like a paintbrush, and all you have to do is drag on the path there where you want to draw. It's a pretty plain line. See, it's selectable here, the kind of stroke you're going to have. There's also larger libraries and stuff. So if you wanted to use a more stylized type of stroke, you'd click here. Here, this is sort of a chalk outline, and then I will up the stroke value so it'll be easier for you to see the difference in the line. If you can sort of see how stylized the line is here, and then if I draw it just by dragging, so you can make, whatever shape you happen to drag across. So that's the brush tool.
Select the blob brush tool by clicking down on the paintbrush tool, and you'll get the sort of sidebar menu and select blob brush tool. You can also select it by holding down Shift and clicking on B on your keyboard. The blob brush tool is much like the brush tool, except it's going to give you both a fill and a stroke value for what you paint. When you use the brush tool, it just creates paths, so you only get a stroke value, but the blob brush gives you a fill and a stroke. So if I just go ahead and drag across the screen and I create this organic shape with it, and I've got an object now that can have both a stroke and a fill value. When I first painted here, you can see that I've got nothing selected for a stroke value. So if I double click on this and go to color swatches, I can now give the stroke and fill value to the object that I've created. Now the problem here is that the stroke is set to only 1 point, so you can't see it. So if I just up that a bit, now it becomes visible. So the blob brush is frequently used in conjunction with the eraser tool to make or sculpt almost more organic and complex shapes in a sort of easier fashion when you can't just create it from using line segments and Bezier tools. Swatches are named colors, tints, gradients, and patterns in Illustrator, and the swatches associated with a document appear in what's called the swatches panel. So you can access the swatches panel by clicking on this icon right here. It sort of looks like a grid. Here it's underneath of just the color panel, but this is the icon for the swatches panel. You can select it that way, or if that's not showing up, you can go over to the drop down menu for window and go down and find swatches, and it's right here. So you could select it either way. I'll click on that to select it, and then the swatches panel opens up. Now with any panel, you can actually take the panel and rip it right out of its pop-up menu. So if I click on this tab right here and just pull out like this, now that panel is separated and I can work with it independently. I can resize it. You see how if I hover over the edges, different things come up. So I can sort of resize it this way. And right now, these are all the swatches that are active in this particular project. So these are my default swatches that come up. So as I said before, swatches can be named colors like these, or tints, which are over here. These are different amounts of black or white in a particular color. This is in the color guide panel. The best example of tints here are different tints from black to white in just the plain swatches panel. I'm going to collapse this. So, and then also there are color patterns available in swatches. This one's called Jive, and that one I guess is Alyssa. And these are just different patterns. And then there are gradients as well. We're going to deal just with solid colors in this video. So when you draw a shape or have anything on Illustrator, I'm just going to draw this rectangle. Right now, you can see it has got a fill value of white and a stroke value of black. The stroke's just 1 point, so I'm going to bump that up a little bit so you can see it better. And if I want to select a color, if I have my swatches panel open, I can see a whole variety of colors that I can choose from. So if I click on the fill panel there and then just select one of these, I'll select this cyan color there, and it changes it to that color. If I go down here and I just click once on the stroke value panel, then I can go over here and I can select this red color and make it that color. So it's that easy. Use the swatch panel to just have an easy access to different colors that you might want to use on an object. Another important thing is that you can open up new color libraries, and you can access them through this icon right here. It looks like some books, right? And it's the swatch libraries menu. I'll just click on that little down menu there, and you'll see that there are a number of different either groups of swatches or individual swatches. So groups of swatches are annotated by the triangle next to them, showing that there's a pull-out menu with even more swatches, or actually with some number of swatches available. And then just individual swatches that are here don't have that drop-down triangle next to them. I'm going to select this swatch group library called Visibone 2, and then that's going to pop out here in its own panel. And if I expand that, you can see the whole thing. And the great thing about Visibone is that these are web safe colors. So these will work really well in HTML, or just if you're creating a website, anything for the web. These are going to show very true on on many people's web pages on their phones. This is what these colors are going to look like all the time. Some of the other library groups are going to contain stuff for inks or print medium. So I open that up, and now let's say I want to change the color of the fill on this rectangle. I can just go over here, find a good green perhaps, and select that, and it'll change to that color. And again, the reason you're choosing this library is because in this instance, it would be you're working on a web project, and you want to make sure you're selecting colors that are going to be appropriate for a website. And Visibone is going to be a library where every color in it is going to be optimized or correct for using in the web. So again, I could change the stroke just like this. And that's just a brief overview of swatches and using the swatch panel. The text tool icon is a letter T. It's right here. You could also hit T on the keyboard. When you select a text tool, you get a standard cursor. You can drag across the screen to create the area where you want the text to fill. And then it's going to fill it with some lorem ipsum. What I'll do here is then just type whatever I want to type on the screen. And you can see right now it's in a 12-point font, regular. There's font styles. Depending on the font you pick, there might be several. So I could switch this to bold. You can't really tell the difference here. And it's not going to change it unless you drag across your text and have it highlighted. So see, it's still regular even though I selected bold. If I had typed more, that what I had typed would have been in bold once I selected that. But if I go here and select bold, it'll change my letters to bold. And then you can see that I've just got a 12-point font. So let's make that a little bigger by clicking up, or I can click this drop down and just go immediately to a larger size. Now, there's a variety of different fonts that I can choose from by clicking that down arrow there, and then you'll see I have a whole slew of different fonts. You can also use Adobe Typekit to get more, but we're not going to do that right now. I'll just select one font, and there you go. Let's try a different one. This one's a little complicated, and I want to show you stroke and fill on these letters. So here's a more simple font. So right now, as you can see, it's a black fill and no stroke value. So if I highlight this, I can double click, of course, on the fill. I'm going to go to color swatches. I like to pick my colors that way. So now I've got a green fill. What about stroke? So I want to add a stroke to it, so I'll double click here and I'll pick red and we'll go Christmassy. So now I've got green with a little red around it, but that fill, that stroke is not very pronounced around the edge. So if I go here and then increase the size of the stroke by I'll just go up arrow to do it. You can see now I can increase that. That was too much. So I'm going to go back down. And there you go. So that's stroke and fill on a font using the text tool. Now, there's a variety of other text tools here. If I just click and hold down, you can see there's type on a path, vertical type, vertical area. So if I go vertical type, now I'm going to be typing vertically, obviously. If I click type on a path tool, first I need to create a path, so let me go ahead and do that. I'm just going to select my pen tool. And there, I've created this path. Go over here and switch the fill and the stroke on that. Okay, so to make it a little easier for you to see the path, I'll select it. And then I'm just going to increase the stroke value a little bit. This is just so you can see it. Now I'm going to go over here and I'm going to select the type on a path tool. And I'm going to click right here and see how my lorem ipsum is that way, so that when I type, I'm going to type on the path that I created. That could be a very handy tool. So those are the basics of the text tool. There are several ways to scale objects in Illustrator. We'll just create a simple polygon here, about a star. So we'll do that. The first and, in my mind, easiest way to scale is by simply selecting one of the points along the bounding box of the object. If you want to scale and keep everything proportional, just click and hold down Shift at the same time, then drag. And you can drag in any direction and it will scale proportionately. Then if you don't want to scale proportionately, you can just hover over a spot, click and drag. See the effects there. So that's an easy way to scale. Also, you can select the scaling tool. It's right here. Or just use the S button on your keyboard. Then you're just going to select one or more objects. I'm going to select the star, then I'll select the scaling tool. Then you can just click and drag to scale. If you want to scale relative to a different reference point, just click on the screen, move the cursor away from the point you've created, then click and drag. And now I'm scaling relative to this position. To maintain proportions, once again, just hold down the Shift key. So if I hold down Shift, then click and drag, the proportions of the star are remaining the same. You can also simply select Object Transform and Scale. Then if I want to scale in a uniform way, I'll click here and just type in a number. So let's say 75%. If I want to preview, I can just click here. And that's showing me how much I'll be scaling down if I scale 75%. So if I click OK. There's also the transform panel available here. Click. And there it is. You can scale along the X or Y axis. Width and height are here. If you click here, then they'll scale proportionately. So here, if I say I'm going to give it a scale, right now it's 473 pixels tall, more or less, 0.4. If I change that to 400 and I have the proportionate length, constraining width and height proportions selected, hit enter. Now it's going to change that height to 400 pixels and change the width proportionately. If I unclick this, change this to say 800. That's not going to force the constraints to stay the same. So those are some of the ways to scale objects.
The layers panel is really important for both the appearance and the organization of your artwork. When you're creating a piece of art in Illustrator and you've opened up a new file, in the layers panel, you'll initially have just one layer called layer 1. So if you create anything to go inside of this artboard, it's going to show up in layer 1. So let's just go ahead and do that. I'm going to select the shape tool and I'm just going to go ahead and make a rectangle. There you go. So now that rectangle is falling under the category or the first layer known as layer 1, and it's called rectangle. And here's layer 1 up here. So let's change the name of layer 1 and we'll just call it original. I'm just calling that because that's the original layer that was created. And here's our rectangle. We'll call this white rectangle.
Okay, and if I widen this layer, this layers panel, now I can read the entire word that's in there. So now you see there's this caret next to original, so I can see the items that are inside of it. So I'm still working on the original layer, and I'm going to select the shape tool again, and let's go with just the ellipse tool, and I'm going to drag across and create that. And let's actually change the color to make it more distinguishable. I'll just make it green. Okay, and now let's call this green oval. Okay, so now inside of the original layer, if I open it up by clicking again on this arrow that's right there, so it points down, I can see both the green arrow and the white rectangle. Now, if I click on the target next to the overarching sort of layer, the original layer, if I click on that, it's now going to select both of these objects. Okay, if I click off of them, they're gone. And I can then, again, I could click on the target here to select just the oval, or here to select the white rectangle. I could hold down Shift and then select this to select both of them if I want to. Okay, now I'm going to close this, and I'm going to create a new layer. The way you create a new layer is just, looks like a little Post-it note or something down here folded over. Just click on that, and now I've got a new layer. And it's called Layer 2. Let's just leave it called Layer 2. I could double click on this and change the name if I wanted to, but I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna leave this called Layer 2. And now I'm working in Layer 2. See how this is highlighted? If I want to create another object now, and let's click over here, I'll just hold down over the shape tool and then select the star tool. I'm just gonna make a little star here. And again, let's just color it just to make it a little easier. We'll make it blue. Okay, so now we've got a blue star there. And as you can see, that's in Layer 2, and it's highlighted like this. If I fly open Layer 2, you'll see there's the actual star. I'm going to double click on this and call it Blue Star. Still working in this layer, I'm going to add another shape. Make a polygon. Let's make it purple. So now I can open up Layer 2, select this layer, double click on it, and call it Purple Polygon. Okay, now I can again open and close this layer. So once again, if I select the target for the overall layer, it'll select both items in that layer. See, I've got both the blue star and the polygon selected. I can click off and not have those. I can then click the layer. Once again, I've got them both. Click off, I can select one by itself. I can hit Shift and select that one. Click off. Now, again, I can open up both of these layers, and now everything is visible to me, and I can still shift click. See, I could click on the purple polygon, and then I could go down here to the white rectangle, hold down Shift, and click on that, and now I've selected items in different layers. But if I want to just select the items in one layer, I can go to the target next to original, click on that, and it'll switch, and I'm just going to select the items inside of this original layer. Now, here's a very important factor. Imagine that you are stacking panes of glass with each layer. So the bottom pane of glass has a picture of a white rectangle on it. So that's the bottom of the stack. The purple polygon is like a pane of glass with a purple polygon on it, and that's the top stack, and you're looking down through the glass. So what I mean by that is, let's reposition the purple polygon over the white star. It is the top layer, and it's also above the blue star. So if I move the blue star over here, it's going to mask that part of the blue star. See, And both of them are above the white rectangle, so they'll mask that. Now let's just go ahead and move the green oval over, and you can sort of guess how is this going to look when I drag it over? What parts of the green oval are you going to see and not see if I drop it right here? Okay, so again, with the panes of glass analogy, it's beneath both the purple polygon and the blue star. To make it more vivid, maybe if I change this from being white to, let's make it black. Again, you can see it's the purple polygon on top, then the blue star, the green oval, the white rectangle, and then finally the artboard. Okay, so that's how you can sort of understand when you're stacking items how they're going to appear. This is a fundamental thing to Illustrator when you're creating images, the stacking order or the layering order of objects and the way that they will appear. So it's very important for you to understand that when you're working on things. And also it's important for you to label the different objects that you put into a piece of artwork, because it's going to make it so much easier to revise your work after you finally created it. If you decide, you know what, I really want to change this this green oval here, it would be very difficult. You might have 50 items inside of a complicated picture to find it, but if you have it named properly, it make it a lot easier to sort of open up and find in a list of things. Sometimes it might not be just as easy to click on an item, and here's another reason why it might be difficult. So if we look in this layers panel, you're going to see this eyeball next to each item. If you click on the eyeball, it's going to make that item disappear. So watch, the purple polygon will go away now. So that's what the eyeball does. I can make the green oval go away this way and then bring them back by clicking. And then also, if you're working on something you don't want, let's say I want to move the oval and the star and the polygon, but I don't want to move the black rectangle. If I marquee drag across the item, so if just click and drag across with the select tool, that would select all of those objects. And if I'm doing detailed work, it might be the best way for me to select stuff, but I don't want to select the black rectangle when I do so. So what I'm going to do is go up here to the layers panel, and I'm going to click right here, and this box will lock the object so it can't be selected. So watch, when I drag across now, it won't select it. And if you notice before, it deselected it as soon as I clicked on it. Watch, I'll do that with the star. Now that's not selected. So I can then drag these items and move them with it being impossible for me to affect the locked items, and then you can unlock. This is very fundamental to Illustrator too when you're working on different items. For example, if you've got a background and you are working over top of that, so let's put let's put a background in here. So I'm going to create another layer by clicking on this, and I'm going to call this layer background. Now, because I want it to be behind everything else, I'm going to move it to the bottom layer. Okay, I'm going to select this layer because I want to be working in that one, and I don't want to affect these other two when I put in the background, so I'm going to lock them both. Now I can't do anything to them, so now I'm in the background. I'm going to select my shape tool, and I'm going to select a rectangle, and I'm going to go to the top corner here, and before I do, I'm going to select a different color. Let's do like a golden color. So now that's the color that's going to be filled. I'm going to have no outline. So I'm going to, for the stroke value, I'm just going to select this, which means nothing. Then I'm going to go to the top corner of my artboard, and I'm just going to drag across and make a rectangle that goes all the way across. So that's going to give me a background that covers the entire artboard. And there you go. So when I did that, I didn't affect any of the other items because they were all locked. And because it's lowest in the layer panel, it shows up underneath of everything else as a background. Now it's not quite wide enough, so I can go over here and adjust that by just clicking on this bounding box here. And you see there's this anchor point. Just click on that with the arrows pointing both to the left and the right, like that, and just drag to the right a little tiny bit to make sure I've covered the entire edge of the square, and click off here. Okay, so that's how you organize and label layers, also how you lock them and make them visible and invisible in Illustrator.
Okay, everybody, so I know that was a lot of material that just got covered there, and hopefully you did some doodling and sort of messed around with the different tools and capabilities of Illustrator that got demonstrated. So now what I want you to do is a bit of a sandbox assignment. And what I mean by sandbox is sort of like with sandbox video games, you can kind of do what you want in the game. Here, I want you to use all of those tools I just showed. So the video was segmented out, and so I showed you how to export files and scale items and use color swatches and use the pen tool and the line segment tool, stroke properties. Showed you how to use the simple shape tool and a variety of other tools. I want you to use all of those different tools that just got demonstrated to you in the making of your own original image, and not an image of yourself, any image you want to create, using all of those tools, and I'll have a list of the tools on the assignment so you know that everything that you need to use. But I want you to go ahead and use all of those tools and create an Adobe Illustrator file for me and upload that file to this assignment. And that's what's going to be your first Illustrator assignment. I'll start giving you more complex or more rigid kind of assignments where you have to create images that are for a specific purpose after this. But for now, I just want you to kind of get used to using all of these different tools and sort of familiarize yourself more with Adobe Illustrator. So I'd like for these to be creative assignments. I really want you to put your best into it, and most of all, have fun while you're doing this. So I look forward to seeing your Adobe Illustrator sandbox assignments once they're turned in. Thanks, everybody.